and welcome to Tea and Strumpets, a Regency romance review. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Kelsey.
And Kelsey, you're talking to me,
which
means you have power.
Yay! Oh my god, it's just like the trial of it. Oh, and my favorite was someone at work literally looked at me yesterday and he's like, Kelsey, you look tired. And I was like, well, I spent 48 hours without power in my house, so I feel like I'm inclined to look tired 2 days later.
Yeah, no, it's crazy because, like, of course you and I both love camping. Like, we can survive without power.
Oh, yeah.
But when you're not expecting it and when you're in a location that you expect to have power.
And there's that, which is hard. Every time John and I went to the bathroom, we just, of course, like hit the switch. And both of us were like, every time we're like, oh. And then we would also just like leave for a walk with the dog and then come back and be like, maybe there'll be power now. No. So what happened, guys, was a tree fell on our power lines. So it was not only an ordeal because the power went out, it was an ordeal because we had to remove the tree that was also now in the way of restringing the power lines. So it was an intensive experience. There was a lot of phone calls made. And then, of course, like when we don't want, like everyone was like, yeah, and when we're done with this, just call and you'll get rehooked to the power. And I'm like, cool, easy peasy, no big deal. Power company wanted to wait 5 days before rehooking my freaking power.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, no, I didn't choose to have the power shut off. A tree fell down. A tree fell down in the middle of the night and knocked out the power lines. This is not my fault. I didn't choose this. And you need to come fix the frickin' power. Like, it's going to take you 20 minutes. You just have to restring it. I had the electrician do all, and like, luckily we were able to talk it down, but it was like 20 different phone calls to different people. And like, John had to like, go up the chain of command and be like, scary dude. And I was like, thank God you can do this because I am not good at this because I'm like tired and I just am like, whatever.
Well, and now, like, is kind of the worst time to lose your power because we're all, like, supposed to be staying at home.
Well, and it's not like I could go to my parents' house. Like, granted, they live an hour away, but, like, my parents are all, like, in their 60s. Mm-hmm. Not really, like, meant to be around people. In fact, my stepdad was like, don't come over.
Yeah.
Not for this incident, but just, like, a couple weeks ago. He's like, you don't need to come visit me. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And then also, too, my dad's like, oh, well, your renter's insurance should cover, like, you staying in a hotel. And I'm like, Dad, we can't go to a hotel.
Nah.
Like,
exactly.
We literally can't go to a hotel right now. Like, luckily, we do camping. So, like, the first morning, John, like, set up our camping stove in the kitchen. So, like, we actually could, like, make food. And then luckily it stopped raining. So we could actually, like, cook dinner out on the barbecue.
Aw. So yeah, you survived and now you have power so we can record our episode, which is so great. But what was kind of cool is that because we had that little hiccup, we ended up releasing our Frolic Friends episode, which was so fun.
It was the day before I lost power.
It was. And if you guys don't know, if you have or haven't listened to it, there's actually a video version of the five of us chatting, and it is on our YouTube channel. So you can grab that link from our show notes if you would like to see our funny faces while we talk about fun things. So,
yes, it was tons of fun to record and I did have a good laugh. It was a good way to spend an afternoon for sure.
I totally agree. So before we jump into the book that we read this week, of course, I have a question for you, Kelsey.
Hit me with it.
All right. So if you could have a Regency Victorian fictional ladies profession, what do you think it would be? And I asked this question. I was kind of inspired because on our Frolic Friends episode, Laura was talking about like World War II era books. And she always wonders what she would be in the war, like what her role would be. And she realized that she would be like a covert radio show correspondent, And I was like, oh, that's so good. So it got me thinking, like, what would I be? So what do you think you'd want to be?
So if I had to have a Victorian Regency profession, aside from like rich lady of the manor, I think I would want to be, I think I'd want to be like a modiste, a dressmaker. I don't know how to pronounce that word, guys. We're going to go with dressmaker.
Neither
a
do I.
fashion creator.
I love that. That was one on my list. I'm not particularly crafty, but I think that would be really fun and rewarding, especially like making something. And it's like such a respectable lady's position, for the time.
And it's respectable, but also like you don't have to be the servant. Because that's the thing is like being a maid or like a lady's maid, like you really never had your own life. Your life was their life, and you're always in the shadows. And like, same thing with being a governess. Like, yes, it's fun to teach the kids, but like, you live in this weird, awkward position.
Yeah.
Versus like, if you make clothes, then like, ta-da.
And you're making something, and it's
and you're
so
making
rewarding.
something. Exactly.
Yeah. So for me, I'm still a little undecided. Maybe I'll figure it out one of these days. But I mean, if I couldn't just be a duchess, then like I'm torn between like maybe like I was like, would I be a suffragist? Like would that be like would I be super political and passionate? I'm not sure. I would like to think I would be, but I'm not, I can't be sure. So like another part of me is like, would I just be a journalist, or would
I like the idea of being a lady journalist, but I'm also thinking, because I like survival, I'm like, what's a good job I can have that makes money that also I'm not struggling every 5 seconds to compete with a man?
Yeah. And so then also I would absolutely love to be a doctor like Dr. Garrett Gibson, but there literally was one. So I feel like that's hard. So yeah, undecided, but something cool and fun. So
exactly.
All right. So the book we are talking about today is A Notorious Countess Confesses by Julie Ann Long. And our countess in this was an actress and an opera dancer. So she had a profession as well.
Yes, she was an opera dancer turned, I wouldn't say courtesan, because like, you know, the opera dancer, well, she was turned courtesan.
Yeah, she was.
She's an actress, opera dancer turned courtesan turned countess. Yay.
Yes. So we have a couple author facts this week because we haven't talked about Julie Ann Long in a while.
We haven't. Such a shame.
Yes. And so she has a fun section of her website, which is titled Julianne Long Answers Questions About Julianne Long. And I'm pretty sure it's from like a long time ago. I think it's from 2005 is when it was last updated, but it's still delightfully fun. And so I've pulled a couple of those questions to share here.
Oh, yes. Please do. Let's hear them.
And they've got that traditional Julianne Long flavor to the responses, which I really liked. So the first question was asked by a Rose Birchall, and it was, "How old are you?" And Julianne Long replies, "Why, I'm 5'8". Thanks for asking, Rose." Next question. And then the other one I really liked was, "If you could dine with any author, dead or alive, whom would it be and why?" And this was asked by a Melissa Lawson. And Julianne replies, "Dine with an author? Why on earth would anyone want to dine with an author? We're a wretched bunch, giddy one moment, I got a good review, racked with insecurity the next, what if I can never write a decent book again, etc. You have to be half crazy to make writing your life's work. Just kidding, mostly. Half my friends these days are authors and I love them all. I think, however, I'd have to choose Jane Austen. From her letters, she sounds exactly like someone I'd love to have in my circle of friends. Caustically witty, unnervingly observant, loyal and passionate, intelligent and kind. Who wouldn't want to have dinner with someone like that?"
Excellent. I love this.
There's lots more questions, so we'll link to that page in the show notes if you'd like to read more.
Yes, I'd like to read more. I'd like to have a dinner with Julianne Long.
I know.
You know, we're in the same neck of the wood, Julianne Long, once this whole shelter in place thing is over. Hey.
Absolutely. Fun.
So today we have our main tropes, which are temptation, the forbidden fruit, the man of God, and the former courtesan. And then we get a nice slow burn between these characters.
Oh, so slow.
Yes.
I say that with love, you know, but it is a very steamy slow burn.
It was a very slow burn. And then it was like, kabam. It's like,
kabam.
Oh, okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. And our main characters today are Evie Duggan and Adam Sylvaine. And Evie is often referred to also as Eve. So yes, we have Adam and Eve.
Cute. I literally didn't put this together the first time through. And then Zoe was like, yeah, I've got Adam and Evie. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes. And you're not the only one. Lots of people I have heard kind of just, you know, skim past that, then don't get the Adam and Eve thing. But I think it's cute. And I also think that that's pretty impressive that, you know, Julianne Long can write a book and have this kind of very obvious thing that still somehow doesn't come to the forefront of everybody's mind just because there's other things that you're thinking about. So very
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yes.
So shall we get into this synopsis, Kelsey?
We shall. Evie Duggan has fallen on hard times, but she's certainly fallen harder in her lifetime. But newly widowed, she has at last been left a small manor in Pennyroyal Green, and she's on her way to start a new life there. It will certainly be different from London, but truly, now is an excellent time to be away from there, and away from the terrible rumors and the nasty nickname that the Ton has given her. The Black Widow, a spider that Miles Redmond had discovered in America where the females kill the males after mating. A truly hateful and very untrue nickname.
As her carriage rolled through Pennyroyal Green, it seems as though the church bells ringing are calling out to her, and although she is not at all a religious sort, she decides to attend the sermon. She and her maid Henny find a spot in the 2 small pews and do not attract too much attention. It seems as though she has met with a normal level of curiosity and no particular animosity. Phew, she thought. Good.
The congregation stirs and comes to life when the vicar walks in. Quote, "She could have sworn that every pair of feminine shoulders rose and fell in a sigh when the vicar looked up, a smile, faint but warm, inclusive but impersonal, ready on his face before he dropped his gaze to his notes. The perfect vicar smile. She'd spent enough time in the theater to admire stagecraft. She'd spent enough time with men to be cynical about all of them."
But she cannot deny that he is an excellent specimen of manhood. He just doesn't affect her that way. Until, that is, he speaks. Quote, "Oh." His voice surprised her, a baritone with the depth of a bell and deliciously frayed at the edges. It was like stumbling into a patch of sunlight on a relentlessly gray day. Her eyes closed. The temptation was to bask in it.
And it's that voice that lulls Evie into an eventual slumber. There was something so peaceful about it, and after all, it was still early morning. She slept peacefully all through his sermon on loving thy neighbor, and was ready to make a hasty escape afterward to her carriage, but Henny was much too taken with the handsome vicar, and begged Evie to introduce them. And as Evie can't really say no to Henny, she relents. Our vicar Adam, of course, noticed the new lady sitting in his congregation, and perhaps it's his visage, perhaps it's his voice, or mayhap it's the riveting content of his sermons, but never before has he put someone to sleep. So yeah, he noticed her.
But his sermon seems to have been well received, and he braces to receive a barrage of embroidery works featuring Love Thy Neighbor soon. As the congregation is filing out, Evie introduces herself and Henny to the vicar. He feels that he has heard something about the Countess of Wareham before, but he can't quite place it. He also can't quite resist a poke at the first person to ever be bored to sleep by one of his sermons. Quote, "Henrietta dipped a graceful curtsy. Your sermon was a balm to me soul, Reverend. As soothing as a lullaby, some might say," Adam said pleasantly.
And then the ladies are off to their new home. But unfortunately not for long, as one of their carriage horses threw a shoe and they're forced to stop. They don't want to lame the horse. Money is tight and her servants know it. And the horse is too important, so they go looking for help. And while Evie is milling about the carriage, she spots a young boy. As she loves children, she makes some silly faces at him and causes him to giggle furiously. But then, spiders aren't pretty, the boy said. She was accustomed to small boys and non sequiturs. Well, I don't know about that. I suspect girl spiders are pretty to boy spiders. And then they continue talking about girl dogs and girl cows and boy cows until the boy's mother finds him and puts a decidedly nasty twist on everything. Quote, "She clapped her mouth shut when she saw Evie. She froze mid-walk, stiff-legged as a hunting dog pointing out prey. Then her eyes frosted, and her mouth became a tight, horizontal line. 'See, Mama,' Polly said cheerfully. 'She doesn't look like a spider. She's pretty, and spiders aren't.'" Oh, God. Evie's breath left her in a painful gust. That hateful, hateful nickname. But how would a boy have known unless he'd overheard his mother talking? Which meant his mother had learned it from someone else. Which meant they knew about her after all. So much for her refuge in Pennyroyal Green. So much for a new life here.
So with that, she wheels around and almost runs straight into the vicar and curses loudly in an Irish accent, calling him a bloody big. Adam is a tease. Big, he prompts. So Evie finishes lamely with vicar. They chat, They jest and end up having a slight misunderstanding when he uses the word inequity, and she assumes that it is in reference to her past. But it was simply a poor choice of words, though neither learns this until much, much later. Adam also sort of slightly flirts with her, and Evie finds herself blushing profusely, something she hasn't done in years. She muses that she's never met a man before that was quite so contained. Quote, as though there was something in him, some potential required control, and whatever it was, whatever he was, pulled at her. The way the earth pulled water into it. It felt stronger than she was, and her entire life had depended upon her being stronger than anyone. So Evie tries one of her patented defenses, flirting expertly, but Adam buttons up tightly and closes off to her. So they're both ruffled at this point, but he finally realizes that their horse has a problem and goes to help, eventually tying his cravat around the hoof to protect it. So then Evie and Henny are on their way again.
Adam continues onward after his chance meeting with Evie on the road to his initial destination, a sick member of his congregation, Lady Fenimore. Lady Fenimore is a dragon of a lady who says what's on her mind and doesn't really like many people. But she does like Adam, so he usually enjoys their visits. But now he's in a foul mood from his interaction with Evie, which just had rankled him somehow. Quote, a thoroughly baffling, unpleasant woman, who had gone from sleeping in church to shrieking in what sounded very much like gutter Irish, which had perversely amused him, to prickly and difficult, to flinging flirtation at him. She'd quite alarmingly sparkled at him, like a soldier hurling boulders with a trebuchet. Despite all of this, two impressions surfaced through the others, and these were the ones that dogged him all the way to Lady Fenimore's house. How he'd first seen her, standing utterly still, 2 hot pink spots on her cheeks, hand flattened against her rib cage, then squaring her shoulders like a pugilist shaking off a blow. Something Maggie Langford had said hurt her. And then there was her freckles. What might it be like to drag his thumb softly over those pale spots, which, if he knew women, were the bane of her existence, to soothe away whatever hurt had put the hot pink in her cheeks? He'd never had a thought like this in his entire life, let alone about a woman he disliked.
His visit with Lady Fenimore is an interesting one, because she ends up confessing to an affair and a grand love. Her daughter Jenny is actually the product of it, and then gives her not valuable but much-loved cross to Adam, asking him to bestow it upon someone one day who needs it. And while Adam is honored, he is also saddened as he realizes that his visits here would soon stop. Lady Fenimore isn't far from death now.
Evie is settling into her very quiet country house, which is miles and miles away from anything she's ever known in her life, reading some mail from her siblings. Her scamp of a brother, Seamus, is writing again for money, and her sister Cora, who has had her 6th baby, a girl who she's named after Evie, Aoife, her original name, but also saying that her husband Timothy has been testier than usual of late. We learn that Evie is the oldest of her siblings and has always cared for them. She is troubled by both letters, but the 3rd letter of the pile is the one that gives her the most pause. It's from an old friend and admirer, Frederick, Lord Lisle, who misses her and asks if he can visit her in Pennyroyal Green in a fortnight. Evie isn't sure she wants to say yes, so she puts off a reply. Because what Evie is realizing is that she wants a chance to create her own history. Quote, to begin again, to decide what she wanted rather than allowing the needs of survival to dictate her life. But damned if she would be bored in the process.
And in order to do this in Pennyroyal, she realizes that she needs an ally to help her make her way in their society. And in fact, she knows just the perfect one.
Adam returns home from his visit with Lady Fenimore to a lady visitor. But it isn't who you think. Instead, Violet Redmond, now Countess Ardmay, is waiting in his parlor and ends up transferring the miniature painting of Olivia Eversea that she got from Lyon's puzzle box in book 3 to his care. She's given it to him so he can decide whether or not to give it to Olivia. Violet confirms without saying that it came from Lyon, but won't give any other details. And after that whopper of responsibility, he heads to the Pig and Thistle for a drink.
It is there that he learns more of the Countess and her reputation from Colin and Ian. Colin asks, quote, what did you think of her? Colin took a sip of his ale. He tipped his head back. Funny, but she reminded me a bit of, a wild bird that needs soothing. Colin choked on his ale and spluttered. Ian's hand froze on its way to lifting his ale to his mouth. What is the matter with you two? It was just an observation. Bloody lyrical observation. Don't you know who your, what did you call her, turtle dove is? And so they tell him of the Black Widow and her reputation. She began as an actress and opera dancer. Everyone vied for her attention. She caused men to fall over balconies. She caused a duel. And eventually a wealthy enough man came along and she became a professional courtesan. And then another wealthier man came along and she moved from the first man. And then the Earl came along, won her hand in a card game, and she had married him to become the Countess. Quote, in other words, the Countess of Wareham, your wild bird, was a courtesan, Adam. The words seemed to stretch languidly out on the table in front of them like a nude on a chaise. It was a voluptuous shock.
This is the moment Adam realizes that saying iniquity to her earlier was in bad form. But he muses about all the behaviors he had seen in her earlier today. Had she truly been hurt? Was she just a good actress? Or was she just acting the part of a countess? And really, he wonders, what had led her down the path of her life? What has led her to become a courtesan? But the Everseas are eyeing him suspiciously, and Adam knows that he depends on them for his livelihood, and any linking of his name to the countesses would ruin him. Upon his return home, there is a package and a letter waiting for him. It's from Evie. It's a new cravat to replace the one he used for the hoof, and a charmingly misspelled letter apologizing for her curtness earlier and inviting him to take tea with her on Tuesday as, quote, I understand it is the custom of Pennyroyal Green natives to feed the vicar as often as possible, and when in Rome, I shall endeavor not to bore you.
Adam is charmed by the letter, the misspellings, the invitation, and the gift, which he knows isn't particularly appropriate. But he has a duty to dine with his parishioners, so luckily he can use this to accept. However, he thinks, quote, she never does anything without a reason, Colin had said. A strategist, his cousins had described her, who knew how to get what she wanted and had always gotten it. Clearly, she wanted something from him. God help him, he couldn't wait to find out what it was.
When Adam arrives next Tuesday for tea, Evie finds herself a bit awestruck again, as, quote, all of her faculties seem preoccupied with just seeing him. They exchange pleasantries and pour drinks, and the conversation dwindles awkwardly. So Adam opens again by saying that she has the distinction of being the first to ever fall asleep in one of his sermons, to which she replies flirtatiously, oh, I don't doubt it, Reverend. I expect none of the women want to miss a moment of gazing upon you. His silence was so instant and palpable, she nearly blinked. It was like slamming a door in a tinker's face.
So Evie can't seem to ruffle him, and he doesn't seem to possess any vanity. And so, grasping herself to find a way back into conversation, she ends up being truthful, apologizing, and slipping that it was his voice that did her in. And she admits she likes his voice. Adam doesn't reply, but, quote, and then one of those smiles of his appeared, so slowly it bordered on the sultry, which gave her time to experience it fully, and to lose her breath before she could brace herself.
The conversation takes a turn again, and they lapse into silence until two double entendres are used, daring and wild abandon. So Evie is forced into honesty once again. Quote, there were two before I was married, Reverend Sylvaine. I beg your pardon. 2 men, she said slowly. Only 2. If you didn't know before, I'm certain by now you've been briefed about my past, and I thought it best to acknowledge it straight away. Otherwise, it will hover always on the periphery of our conversation.
But Adam isn't too shocked by this, and in fact informs her that she's only one of the many colorful people who live in Pennyroyal Green. He isn't here to judge. He also lets her know that he isn't here to play games. Quote, do you know why I liked it when you said bloody? Because it seemed sincere. I'm sorry to hear it. It was me at my worst. He made an impatient noise. It was you being truthful. I prefer you to be who you are, and you should know that I very much dislike being steered, Lady Wareham.
Ooh, he's onto her. So they move on to the real reason she invited him here, and she starts with a confession, quote, I should like to have some friends. Evie tells him she doesn't have any anymore, none that aren't of the fair weather variety, and she's ever so sorry that her husband died, and describes the moment when he keeled over into his eggs and she cleaned his face off while the maid shrieked. And now that he's died, she's alone again. And after growing up with so many brothers and sisters in Ireland, she's not good at being alone.
And now Evie's heard that there's a Pennyroyal Green Ladies Society, and she'd like to be part of that. Adam knows that this will be a huge mountain to climb. Plus, is she sure that they are what she wants? And these are his people. What has Evie done, other than all of the scandalous things that he knows about her past? Why should he trust her in this matter? Evie replies, quote, I know it all sounds very damning, Reverend, but it's easy to draw conclusions from things you hear. It may surprise you that I've never had the opportunity to be reckless, that the choices I made were not a product of whimsy or weak moral fiber. And finally, she supplies, quote, I want an opportunity to be a friend, to begin again, to be who I am.
And though he knows that she is a talented actress, and though he knows that she is playing to what he said earlier, he decides that she deserves a chance and agrees to help. The first outing, shall we say, is a charity auction for baked goods by the ladies of Pennyroyal. Evie has brought some ginger cakes, and of course when they come up, all the wives whisper and refuse to let their husbands bid. Adam gets extremely angry and ends up bidding 5 whole pounds for them. This causes quite a stir, as you can imagine. Then later, Mrs. Margaret Langford, Polly's mother, who had insulted Evie before, her tea cakes come up for the bidding, and Mr. Langford starts the heckling, calling them akin to rocks. So, of course, Evie comes to the rescue and starts bidding off at 2 pounds. Quote, although, she mused, raising her voice, who can put a price on the loving labor of a woman of this fine town put in day after day, all in an attempt to feed their families, to keep them healthy and happy? 3 pounds, she said firmly, as if she'd reconsidered their value.
And this starts the ladies in the audience off. They continue to bid higher in appreciation for their fellow ladies. Evie finally does win it with a 10-pound bid and also buys herself a more receptive introduction. So Adam formally introduces her to the leader of the society, who she'll have to continue to win over. Mrs. Sneath will definitely be the most difficult, but Evie is herself and admits that she has a lot of knowledge in the world of men and should like to share that with the ladies of Pennyroyal for, quote, they should never allow men to treat them like anything other than queens. If they'd like to know how to accomplish this, I'd be delighted to share what I know about men.
Mrs. Sneath is shocked, of course, but agrees to convey this to the ladies, and returns with Mrs. Langford and 2 young women, Mrs. Amy Pitney and Josephine Charing. In fact, the ladies have discussed it, and to be able to better determine if she's a good fit for this society, would she join them to experience some of the work they do? Quote, so some sort of test was imminent, it seemed. So be it. Evie gave them a regal, neutral smile. A sound plan. We should like you to join us at the O'Flaherty house tomorrow. I'd love to, she said immediately, even though she hadn't the faintest idea what that meant, and even as she thought she heard the vicar suck in a breath.
But Evie has made the first step, and tomorrow a new challenge awaits. That evening, Adam is treated to a visit from Colin, who's come to raise his eyebrows about the 5-pound purchase and his very public approval of Evie. And while Adam tries to pass it off and say he's just helping a parishioner, Colin knows better. And he's worried about Adam, he says. But he says more, too. Quote, and Evie Duggan, how shall I put this? It's as though you're fencing with a foil and she's fencing with a saber. You're in 2 very different classes, my friend.
Adam is, of course, quite miffed by this chastisement from Colin, of all people. But he gets the warning. He doesn't like it, but he gets the message from their conversation. The next day, Evie finds herself in the carriage with Mrs. Sneath and the Mrs. Pitney and Charing on their way to the O'Flaherty home. Only, once they arrive, it seems since the other 3 ladies have all tried their hands at helping the O'Flahertys, won't Evie have to go? They'll be back in a few hours' time to see how she fares. Ta-ta!
So Evie squares her shoulders and approaches the loud, screeching house with a smile and determination. because this is actually her wheelhouse. She's learned that there are 6 children and that the mister is rarely seen. And if he's seen, it's usually at the pub. Oh, and they have a large dog who makes herself known by galumphing into Evie before she makes it to the door, knocking her down and getting muddy paw prints all over her. But luckily, the dog is friendly, so she enters the house and assesses the situation.
Mary O'Flaherty is exhausted. There is much screaming from many of the children. The dog is barking, and the house is grimy. But Evie isn't put off by this. No, she knows this very well from her own childhood and knows exactly how to start. She takes 2 fingers to her mouth and issues a loud whistle. At once, the children stop moving, and Evie notices something. They're all wearing what appears to be crude swords and admiral's hats folded from old sections of a broadsheet. Plus, they'd tied up one of their brothers with twine to the settee. But Evie has been a sibling and an actress, so she's ready for this role. Quote, "I'll have your attention," Evie snapped out sharply, "right this instant." They whirled on her, surprised and froze. Before they could rebel or stir or squeak, she demanded in the frustiest, most stentorian, most intimidating, aristocratic voice she could muster, the kind that carries to the back of the theaters. "I'd like to speak to the captain of you children at once." "But we've no captain," said one of the boys, sounding worried. "No captain?" She advanced into the room and took a dark, frowning look around. "No captain? We must remedy this at once. Quickly, which of you is the oldest? Tell me now."
And so Captain Catherine is named, a young girl who reminds Evie too much of herself. Evie bestows upon Catherine her St. Christopher's medal, calling it the Captain's Medal and telling her it will give her luck and keep her safe. But a captain has responsibilities. Quote, "Now the captain's job is to rally the troops and make sure this ship is fit to sail and protected against pirates and marauders at all times, as well as to protect the babies in your care. The HMS O'Flaherty must be spotless, mind you, from floor to ceiling, and so must the proud mates who sail her. How else will you properly serve your liege mother? For she is your commander, and you sail at her pleasure." She gestured to Mary O'Flaherty, who had taken a seat in the rocking chair, clutching the baby, watching all of this with dazed wonder. "Now, I shall appoint the ship's officers and assign duties, but it will be up to you and your queen to make sure they're done well and done often. First, untie your brother at once. You are a crew now, and you will look after each other and protect each other, not tie each other up. And for your first command as a crew, fetch me a pail of water, boys." So good. I love it so much.
Hours later, Adam arrives to see Mrs. Sneath and the ladies hovering on the walk of the O'Flahertys because Evie hasn't come out yet. And also, there's no screaming. And they're all quite unnerved. So Adam, concerned, rushes into the house to see what is going on and is certainly shocked by what he sees. Quote, "The windows were flung open, the room was filled with light, and air circulated friskily. The faded rug had clearly been taken out and beaten within an inch of its life, and straightened nicely. The dishes had been collected and scrubbed and stacked. The hearth had been swept, the furniture righted, and the youngest girl was wielding a broom in the other part of the room, sending up luxurious clouds of dust. Every last one of them appeared to be tiptoeing as they went, and not one of them so much as hummed. Mrs. O'Flaherty was also asleep in her chair, mouth wide open, snoring softly. The toddler was asleep in its mother's arms, thumb inserted into his mouth. It wasn't until he was deeper into the room that he saw Eve. She was standing near the window, wearing a paper admiral's hat. She appeared to have some sort of rag pinned around her dress, a makeshift apron, and she was holding the baby in the crook of one arm.
Adam is, of course, shocked at the whole situation and quite taken with Evie's maternal moment, and even more shocked when the children bow to him and continue on with their work. Evie explains that she grew up in a brood of 8 and she was the oldest, so this is basically an old hat for her. And later, as they grew, she became the sole parent, and she still looks after them all today. And so Adam goes to inform the ladies outside that it's safe to enter. They ask, but did Evie survive? And he can't help but reply with a bit of theater. Quote, he paused in thought for dramatic effect. Perhaps Lady Wareham's influence was rubbing off on him. "Mrs. Sneath, I've provided a lost soul for you to reform. Now, do you recall how you'd once hoped to witness a miracle? Before I die, it's my fondest hope, Vicar. Go inside. I think you'll find your prayers have been answered."
That evening, after her success, Evie arrives home to 2 disturbing letters from Seamus and Cora. Cora's husband hasn't come home for 2 nights, and Seamus has met another lady who seems to have swept him off his feet again. And he needs more money. So there's more for her to worry about now. And later that week, the ladies begin to take Evie up on her offer to help them with men. Miss Charing visits Evie to ask how to catch the vicar's eye. Evie, ever the diplomat, tells her that the fluttery feeling that she gets when thinking about the vicar, you know how she gets all tongue-tied around him. Well, is there any young gentleman who acts that way around her? Because if the vicar isn't acting as such, perhaps she should move her attentions to that young man, as he may be more deserving. But just a thought. And as soon as Miss Charing leaves, Miss Pitney arrives with similar question. She likes the vicar, of course, but has a suitor right now anyway. However, she's been in love with a young man who has his eye on Miss Charing. So what should she do? And how does she charm this exceedingly handsome suitor of hers? Well, Evie dispatches sound advice once more, and Miss Pitney leaves happily. And from these meetings, Evie realizes that Miss Pitney is quite a deal sharper than most would give her credit for.
And finally, once Miss Pitney has left, another guest pops out from hiding in her bushes. It's Adam, and he was hiding from Miss Pitney departing. He's brought Evie a book of Greek myths, as he had previously related the O'Flahertys to Hercules' Nemean lion, and finds out that her next task from the ladies is visiting Lady Fenimore, which he relates to the Aegean Stables task. However, then we have a very convenient scratch that is noticed from his dive in the shrubbery, so we simply must come inside and doctor the cut so it doesn't ruin his shirt immediately. And this leads to a physical and emotional closeness as they are touching, but also discussing more of Evie's past, taking care of her siblings, and Adam's trials of being a vicar, all the births and the deaths that he oversees. But then Adam asks an unexpected question. Lady Wareham, why 2?
And while shocked, she feels compelled to answer and supplies that she needed the money to take care of her family. But did he mean, quote, why those 2 men? Or why wasn't I a respectable seamstress or housemaid? Or a flower girl instead? Both, he replies. I hadn't the skills for the first, and I would have starved if I were the second.
The men is more of a complicated answer, but it boils down to her brother Seamus was in debt to one of them. That's how it started. And after that, a richer fellow had come along, and then her husband. And while many feel this is a horrifying scenario, she doesn't pity her situation. Look at Mary O'Flaherty's situation with a drunk husband, for example. She preferred survival, quote, my own and my family's, to near certain death on the streets.
Adam ponders for a while, finally saying, sometimes the only choices we have, even the ones made out of love, isolate us. And at this, Evie is shocked. He actually understands. But she understands too because she realizes that he feels the same way. He is lonely as well. And then Adam supplies, 2, he said softly, deliberately as laying down a chess piece. 2 is my number as well, Lady Wareham.
The air fairly sizzles after this comment, and she can't help but ask how long it's been. But Adam saves them both as he says he has another parishioner to visit.
Unfortunately, the town gossips see Adam on his way home from Evie's, and because her manor is the only one down that road, they make some assumptions as to what has transpired.
Next, Evie has her visit to Lady Fenimore's house, which of course goes quite well as Lady Fenimore truly appreciates Evie's candor. She likes her so much, she requests her again.
Our next scene is the assembly, which is being held at the Everseas Manor in the ballroom. Evie has been invited, but doesn't expect to dance. 2 important things happen at this dance. Adam loses his resistance and dances a waltz with Evie. The whole town watches, mouthed agape, as they can see the chemistry. And Amy Pitner's suitor turns out to be Lord Hainsworth, an old friend of Evie's husband who has always wanted Evie and insists she dance with him for old time's sake. And during so, propositions her again. She says no way and also begs him not to marry Amy. But he likes her well enough, and Amy also has lots of money, so she'll suit his needs. Evie is devastated because she likes Amy and knows she'll be dismally unhappy married to this ogre. But Hainsworth threatens Evie not to make a hash of it. Besides, does she really think Miss Pitney will believe her over him? Of course, Amy already senses the tension between the two and is not happy.
So the next day, Adam is going to the O'Flahertys to help with some repairs and is happy knowing that he's going to see Evie there. He gets a drop-in from Ian Eversey, who lets him know that Mr. O'Flaherty was seen at the Pig and Thistle just before, so Adam readies to leave earlier than he was planning. Though he does ask Ian if he knows Lord Hainsworth, and Ian hesitatingly supplies that there's a barrister who might have some info on him nearby. Evie also receives news that same morning from her sister Cora. Her husband has been gone for a week now, so she sets off to the O'Flahertys a bit distracted. When she arrives, she realizes something is wrong, as she doesn't hear any children at all. Instead, she hears Mr. O'Flaherty yelling, and enters quietly unnoticed to see the children cowering in the corner. But then he raises his hand at Mary, and Eve shrieks and flies at him. But Adam is only a few steps behind her and gets in the middle. He successfully removes Mr. O'Flaherty from the house and threatens him to never return. The children celebrate. Catherine knew the St. Christopher medal would keep them safe from him. But Evie is overcome by the whole experience, so similar to what she knew as a girl. So she goes outside to gather herself near a large oak tree and is followed closely by Adam.
They talk about Evie's father, who was also a drunk and hit their mother mostly. And they talk about his father, who was also a bit of an angry brute. Quote, "He'd never said these things aloud to another soul. He wasn't quite certain he'd drawn these conclusions quite this clearly before this moment, but he wanted to give something of himself to her. Even as he knew these exchanges of confidence bound them even closer together, like a cat's cradle, even as he knew they simultaneously unraveled each other." And from that touching moment, we move to another, because Adam decides to give Evie Lady Fenimore's cross, and as he puts it around her neck, he can't resist. Quote, "He watched as if in a dream as his mouth lowered, and first just his breath stirred the dark fine hair, then his lips at last were against her skin. He pressed slowly, lightly, a kiss there. Her breath hitched, half sigh, half moan, the most wholly erotic sound he'd ever heard in his life."
They're finally brought out of the moment by Molly, the dog barking, and good thing too, as the ladies of the society are arriving. Of course, they do notice how close the two had been standing, and they also quickly notice the cross. But Evie is in a bit of a dream state from the moment under the oak and fails to notice any of the coldness or distance from the other ladies as they help with the children. Such is her bliss that she foolishly asks Amy to take a walk with her, intending to tell her the truth about Hainsworth. However, she's too late because Hainsworth has prepared Amy, telling her that Evie propositioned him and that she should expect Evie to say it was the other way around. Amy lashes back viciously, and Evie realizes that she may have lost this round. But Amy isn't done, for when the vicar waves at them, she shoots back with, quote, "You do know that the entire town will shun the vicar if he takes up with you, Lady Wareham, and it will be the ruination of him." Evie's voice shook with the effort to control her temper. "Consider that he gave the cross to me because he thought I might have need of the comfort, Miss Pitney, and consider that a good man recognizes the good in others. Consider that he views me as a friend, and only that." Amy turned her back to her and said with weary incredulity, "Oh, for heaven's sake, at least do me the honor of assuming I'm not stupid. I may be plain, Lady Wareham, but I'm not blind, and neither is anyone else in this town."
Burn!
Such a burn.
And in fact, the shunning commences immediately. The church is very empty on Sunday. All the ladies and their families absent, except Mrs. Neath, who is obviously there as a statement. Evie sits in shock in the pews, and Adam somehow delivers his sermon. Colin gives him an "I told you so" look from the front row. His uncle Jacob tells him to fix whatever has caused this. And later, at Adam's scheduled meeting to join the ladies to discuss the winter ball, the ladies give their ultimatum. "You are a very good man, Reverend Sylvaine, but sometimes merely setting an example of goodness is not enough. And while the Countess of Wareham has undeniably been remarkably helpful with the O'Flahertys, based on some new information we have obtained, we nevertheless believe we have cause to curtail her association with the committee."
And she proceeds to speak about Lord Hainsworth, Evie's advances on him, and her attempt to disparage him with Miss Pitney. And no, while they haven't discussed their concerns directly with the Countess, they feel that she'll know their decision imminently. Plus, they do a bunch of other snarky Bible lady stuff, stitching proverbs about sin and lust on pillows for him, which really pisses him off. So he leaves as gracefully as he can, fuming. Before he leaves, he offers one word of advice to Miss Pitney, that she should ask Hainsworth if he knows of a man named Bartholomew Tolliver.
The next time she sees him, Amy does ask. His answer is just smooth enough to not prompt further discussion, and she decides to have her father look into this man anyway. The winter ball arrives, and Evie's been shunned by now. However, she dresses in silk and goes because she wants to see Adam.
Amy Pitney is at the ball calling it off with Hainsworth because her father has learned that Tolliver was holding debts of Hainsworth and he intended to use her dowry to pay it off. And she finally has realized that Hainsworth is a skis.
Hainsworth doesn't leave the ball, but stays to cause trouble. He starts to make lurid comments about Evie to Adam, and Adam snaps, furious about Hainsworth starting rumors about Evie propositioning him. Things escalate until Adam straight up punches Hainsworth in the face and insists he tell the truth in front of everyone. But even though this astonishing scene has transpired, Adam knows he's sunk, so he hurriedly makes his exit.
Evie catches up with him, but he realizes he's gone too far and tells her that they probably should never see each other again because he is the vicar and he just struck a man in the face. Evie says, quote, "It was glorious. He deserved it. It was shameful, and I realized standing there that I would have enjoyed hurting him even more. The ass. It solved nothing, and I feel like hell. I should apologize to every person in the room. That's not who I am. I don't know who I am anymore. I would wager everything they've already forgiven you. They'll likely erect a monument to the event in the square. They might forgive me once." The implication being that she was controversy incarnate. It was bound to happen again.
And Adam is forgiven promptly, as Evie had predicted. Evie did not fare as well. She had officially been cut. But Evie can't seem to stop trying to have a friendship with Adam over the next week or so, until finally he sends her a note back to her missives reading, "Please stop."
Around this time, Adam also gives the miniature back to Olivia, and she admits out loud for the first time in her life that he's aware that she loved Lion.
The evening that Evie receives the note, she realizes that Henny's recent sniffles have turned into something much worse, and her dear friend is quite unwell. When Henny descends into fever, Evie sends a footman for the doctor. However, the doctor, Amy Pitney's father, has just gone out to a mother in labor. But luckily, Adam is there having dinner with the family, and when he hears of the situation, he rushes out to Eve's house.
He finds Eve in a state of panic and Henny in a very bad way. He finally coaxes Evie to sleep a bit while he sits with Henny. She does, and Adam sits with Henny and prays and prays. And by some miracle, or by a fever that has run its course, the fever finally breaks in the wee hours of the morning.
And when Adam emerges from his vigil, Evie awakens, the time apart, the dim lighting, the lack of sleep. Well, whatever the magical combination, it leads to honesty, which leads to a kiss of Adam's instigation. And that kiss leads to encounter number 1, where they get into it pretty quickly after 200 pages of wanting and have a pretty exquisite coupling.
Afterwards, though, things get awkward and Adam takes his leave. Evie is especially swept up with the emotion of the event and has started guarding her heart because she never wanted to be at the mercy of any man.
That very same day, we get some more complications into the story. Frederick, Lord Lisle, has come for a visit, and Evie isn't sure what to think. He is a kind gentleman with a good spirit and a sense of humor, and she knows he is likely to want to make her life better in some way. Her tryst with Adam, which she knows will entangle her heart, weighs heavily upon her, and she's indecisive as to what she wants. But regardless, he is here, and she will be a good hostess.
Adam is feeling quite jubilant after his night with Evie, grinning like a schoolboy and quite wrapped up in the idea of her. He just knows he needs to see her again after their night together. So he grabs the wildflowers from the vase in the parlor of his home and sets off to her house.
Meanwhile, Frederick has arrived at Evie's, and they're making pleasantries and exchanging minor flirtations in her parlor. She infers that her life is much duller here in the country than it was in London, and Frederick is inclined to believe her. That is, until a very handsome visitor arrives with a bouquet of wildflowers. Freddie, being who he is, can't help himself. Quote, "The vicar," Freddie said on an amused hush. "Have you found religion, my dear? I didn't think things were bad as all that. Or have you been very bad, and he's here to chastise you?"
Suffice it to say, neither Freddie nor Adam like each other very much when they do meet. Adam is jealous, and Freddie can't help but keep poking the bear and making things worse, for he delights in these sorts of games. In fact, he invites Adam to join them for an early supper, and Adam accepts. So Adam remembers that Frederick was the man who had lost the right to marry Evie in the card game, and he just can't back down. Supper is a tense affair full of innuendos and terse comments slung across the table at such a rate and volume that dinner much resembled a game of chess.
But finally, Frederick makes one comment too far, and Adam realizes that he is overdue to leave. Quote, "Frederick smiled slowly, enjoying this. I admit it's been too long since I've seen her, and I've never seen her looking lovelier. So fresh, so deceptively innocent. And I must compliment the necklace, Evie, how it adds that necessary flair of innocence. But she's so artful about appearing to be whatever she'd like to be. A talent all actresses share."
So Evie walks Adam to the door and finally has a moment to converse privately with him since their time together the night before. Quote, "Adam," she hissed, "what in God's name? What on earth makes you think you have the right to—" He halted abruptly, then turned with a finger to his lips. She fell silent instantly. They stared at each other for a moment, and then he leaned down slowly, deliberately, and whispered in her ear, "I hope you took the time to wash the scent of me off your body, my lady, before you rode him."
Ugh, not cool, Adam, not cool. That was harsh.
So harsh.
And of course, Evie is beyond furious and beyond hurt. She reaches to slap him, but he catches her hand in midair and tells her, "Slapping me would be redundant, Eve." And then he dropped her arm as if it were dropping the carcass of a snake and walked away.
When Eve returns to the dinner table, she tells Freddie that she wants him to leave. And he sincerely apologizes and asks her to listen to just one thing that he has to say. He wants to marry her, to have her join him in London as his wife. She'll not want for anything. Will she think about it at least for a fortnight? And Evie isn't in the kind of position not to think about it, so she agrees to do so, and Freddie takes his leave.
Later that evening, after an exhausting, emotional day, Evie is trying to calm down when she notices a figure in her garden that gives her a start. It is, in fact, Adam, who pauses at her gate and stays there for a long time. So she goes out. "I'm not really lurking," he said by way of greeting finally. "Just experiencing a little indecision." But then he admits, quote, "I have behaved horribly. I should like to apologize." "Very well, go right ahead." "I apologize." "I'm bowled over by your conviction." He took a breath, released it. "I hadn't the right. It was unlike me." "How do you know if it's unlike you? Have you much experience playing the jealous swain then, Adam?" "None," he said evenly.
And the apology continues in the form of an honest conversation where they find a truce. And then Evie asks what she really wanted to know, which is why is he here? But the answer shocks her. Quote, "Lady Fenimore died tonight. An epiphany broke over her like a wave. Evie had been courted by kings and pursued by princes. She'd married an earl who'd won her hand in an infamous card game. And now, all of it, all of them, the men and their courtships and the flowers and the jewels and the duels, suddenly seemed like so much Punch and Judy, like little boys at their games. She suspected she looked upon greatness for the first time in the form of a dusty, weary, rueful vicar who did things like hold the hand of an old woman as she breathed her last breath and throw his fist into the jaw of a man who slurred her questionable honor and come in the dead of night to sit by the bed of her maid. Awe and a terrible, beautiful fear muted Eve."
They embrace for comfort, and the embrace leads to a kiss, and the kiss leads to encounter number 2, which is just as explosive a coupling as the first. Afterwards, she tells him, needs him to believe her, that she's never slept with Freddie or Hainsworth. Adam insists that actually, it doesn't matter. He does believe her, but even if she had, he would have found a way to her anyway. They realize without saying it that they love each other. But somehow that doesn't matter either, because there really isn't a way for them to be together.
The next morning, Evie tells Adam that she's going to London in a fortnight for good. Pennyroyal will never accept her, and they are so lucky to have him, and he deserves a chance to be happy. Adam doesn't want to accept this fate, but Evie insists, and they do part.
Time passes, and it's time for Evie to leave for London. Henny has them all packed, but as they see the church on their way out of town, Henny insists that they stop to pay their respects one last time and show these Pennyroyal binnies what she's made of. They arrive late after Adam has just begun his sermon. Henny nods to him very subtly, and Adam breathes a sigh of relief and crumples his sermon into a ball and throws it away over his shoulder, shocking his congregation. And then he begins. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. A few gasps erupted. His voice rang out bold and clear. It was safe to say everyone was awake now. Evie Duggan, you are the seal upon my heart. You are the fire and the flame that warms me, heals me, burns me. You are the river that cools me and carries me. I love you, and love may be as strong as death, but you... I know now you are my life. And though I wish I could have protected you and kept you safe from some of the storms of your life, I find I cannot regret any part of your past, for it has made you who you are, loyal, passionate, brave, kind, remarkable. You need repent nothing. The last word fell like a gavel. Not a single person moved or breathed. Quote, there are those who think good is a pastime, to engage in like embroidery or target shooting. There are those who think beauty is a thing of surface and forget it's really of the soul. But good is something that you are, not something that you do. And by that definition, I stand before you today and declare that Evie Duggan is one of the best people I have ever had the privilege of knowing.
And then Mrs. Sneath decides to interrupt this lovely speech to apologize and admit that she and the ladies had the wrong of it, which is nice, but definitely throws off the groove. Amy and Josephine also get up and quote some scripture as a way of apology. And before Adam can pick back up, the church door opens, and Evie's brother Seamus comes in with her sister Cora and all of her family, because Adam had sent for them for Evie, who is more than overjoyed and relieved to see them.
However, there's still one important thing left to do, which is for Adam to ask Eve to marry him, which he does very earnestly, very eloquently, in front of everyone. And she accepts.
And then we have the epilogue, which is short and has an update on pretty much every character we've read about. The townsfolk have accepted Evie. Mr. O'Flaherty was never seen in Pennyroyal again. Seamus Duggan was a handsome fellow who quickly captivated the bereft hearts once the vicar was wed. And Cora and Mrs. O'Flaherty became fast friends. Also, Olivia was being seen in Lord Lansdowne's company an awful lot.
And Adam and Eve live happily ever after.
Yay! Oh, so after much yearning and burning, they're together. But
yay!
Shall we adjourn to the parlor before we chat?
We shall.
So today I want to talk about our email newsletter. So you guys should all sign up if you're listening. We totally encourage that. Our email subscribers get to learn all of the books that we're reading each month in advance. They also get cool new extras. And starting soon, all of our subscribers will get a little something special from all of our interview guests too, that listeners won't necessarily hear. So we've also got some really great upcoming guests that I can't wait to announce. So you definitely want to sign up now so you don't miss that. You can sign up on our website or visit bit.ly/strumpetsubscribe. And that'll, of course, be linked in our show notes.
And today we have a book recommendation, which comes from our Twitter thread about disabled romances. This one was suggested by Nicola Davidson. So thanks, Nicola. One of Nicola's own books was recommended too, so we'll be talking about that one later. But this week she recommends A Scandal by Any Other Name by Kimberly Bell. Their heroine in this one was born with spina bifida, and the reviews for this one look really good too. Plus the synopsis has us hooked. So we'll link to that in the show notes, and many thanks for the awesome recommendation.
And if you have a book recommendation, we would love to hear from you. If you've got an inclusive author you love, we totally want to hear about it and share it. So let us know through our email, romancepod@gmail.com.
And if you'd like to find us on social media, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Tea and Strumpets, on Facebook and Pinterest /Tea and Strumpets, and on YouTube if you search our name.
Yes. And finally, we would love to ask you to rate, review, and subscribe. You can find us everywhere you get podcasts. In fact, you can find us where you're listening to us right now. All right. So, Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve. Well, this was just like a quaint little book.
Yeah, it's funny because we talked about like what we remembered about it, and I remembered really loving this book. You remembered, I think, not loving it because it was like, we just want to know about Olivia and Lion.
Yeah.
Why are we hearing about these other people? And so I kind of thought like coming back to it, maybe I'd like it more because I wouldn't feel that anxiety of getting to Olivia and Lion. How did you feel in that regard?
I think I liked it a bit more, mainly because I really liked Evie as a character. Like, she was closed off, but mainly just because she was full of survival and had to take care of her siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will say, though, reading it closer, I wish we'd gotten a little bit more of Adam, because in Chase's book, you know, he has that encounter with Adam when he's meeting with him for the first time to see if he'd be a good vicar.
Yep.
And so, like, and then he has this surprise moment where he meets Adam and, like, his pain is relieved. And we don't really have that, like, I guess you could say, like, the Henny Fever situation was, like, similar.
Yeah.
But we don't really have that same sort of, like, you know, ethereal quality that he supposedly has.
Yeah. We get a lot about Evie's past. And we get some of Adam's past where he kind of starts to talk under the tree about his father and how he kind of like wanted to grow up to be a man very different than his father. And that's why he's like so calm, so chill.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we definitely learn more about Evie. She's extremely dynamic and I really like her too. She's kind of a surprise. Like you expect her to be like this very like, I don't know, like learned woman who's like very sexual. And instead she is sexual and learned, but she's like, her past is not at all what it seems on the surface. And I really liked that.
No, I really did too, because everyone's like, she's so manipulative. She's so manipulative. And it's like, she can be, but she's not actually. And I think I got just so offended when people are like, well, she'll do anything. And I'm like, not really. Have you seen what she's actually done?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent slow burn. I think that it was actually really hard to write the synopsis because it was like pages and pages and pages of like staring at each other and like tension.
Yeah.
And you cannot translate that in a synopsis.
No,
so I
not
feel
at
like
all.
you get a lot more reading at this book than you get hearing about it. And I kept trying, but I was like, all right, it's just because I felt like I could also sum up this book in a sentence. It's like, you know, a vicar and a former courtesan meet and have instant chemistry and attraction. The, you know, circumstances of who they are, plus the townsfolk being kind of douchey, keeps them apart for a while until they finally are like, fuck it, we're going to be together and y'all can suck it.
Yeah. And then everyone's excited for them. Done.
Yeah. Because they realize that they're in love and like she's a good person.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I felt like the story was. I feel like the story is really nice to read. I think it was hard to read it after Ian's book. Like
Agreed.
It was hard to read it after such a like epic book.
And I think it was hard to read it, like, especially for me, too, because even just the books I've been reading outside it have had all these, like, super strong, tortured male heroes. And, like, neither one of these heroes was, like, particularly tortured in any way. Like, they had past, and, like, there were negative things in the past, but neither one of them had this, like, deep, burning torture they had to, like, fix with meeting each other.
Yeah. And it was funny because I think an episode or two ago, I asked about like low stakes romance. And I feel like this is such that perfect low stakes romance.
Yeah.
The stakes are reputation. You know what I mean?
It,
like,
yeah.
It's really it. And it's just like, It's just literally about these two falling in love. I think it wasn't what I wanted to read right now. And I'm trying really hard not to hold that against the book. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think it was still a good book. It was easy to read in that I wanted to keep turning the pages, like I just wanted to keep going.
No, and you do get into it very quickly.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's fun to read, and like both Evie and Adam have like really good witty dialogue with each other, and then even with the other characters where Evie's like, she wants them to like her, but she's not actually putting on a facade. Like she's never pretends with them. She blatantly tells them what she wants, and they like are shocked, but they're like, but she's honest, so I don't know what to do about this.
And that O'Flaherty scene when she goes in and just...
it's just my favorite scene in the whole book.
It's definitely the best scene in the book, like 100%, but also like it is a scene that I remember outside of this book. And it is such an incredibly heartwarming, heart-wrenching, like I love that scene so much. It's so good. It makes me like want to cry of like happiness and I don't know. It's such a good scene.
Yes, absolutely. I will say too, and I mean, we can talk about this more later in the feminist recap, but I will say I had a lot of frustrations with it because I just like hate the hypocrisy of women for so long.
You mean of the whole book?
Good, and the whole book. Like,
yeah, gotcha.
Oh, good
I thought you
society.
meant the Flaherty scene, and I was like,
no.
Me?
But that's what I mean is like, she's wrought this epic change, and yet instead of being like, oh my God, who is this woman? Like, let's learn more about her. They're like, okay, well, you passed this round, but
yeah,
your past is still like, even though everything we witness is you trying to help, we're not going to believe any of that. We're literally just going to believe the rumors and like the other shit that says bad things about you, because even though you're doing good in front of our face, it must be false.
Yeah,
like,
it reminds me like
so
much. We talked about this in our Frolic episode too. Like it reminds me of the Music Man and like the catty ladies.
Oh, yeah.
Pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, cheep, 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 talk a lot, pick a little more. Like that's the women of this town remind me of that like gossipy like group of like catty women who just kind of So yeah, let's get into that more in our feminist recap. But let's start off now with our hero rating. So we have Adam Sylvaine, our broody, jealous, angsty.
Well, he only becomes broody and jealous like at the end. The rest of the book, he's like so composed. And as Evie says, like he's so contained. Like he literally the second he feels her trying to manipulate him, he shuts down. He completely blocks her and he's like, no, don't do that. And just his whole attitude changes towards her. But
every time that she is honest and natural is when he like falls to pieces for her. It's so cute.
It's so cute. But it's just like, but I like it because like they're learning to be honest with each other.
Yep.
And he is like, he wants to kiss her. He wants to do this. And like, even when he gives her the necklace and that tension just like has built to this point.
A kiss on the neck.
Like a kiss on the back of the neck. But let's be real. Like you get that kiss on the back of your neck and you just get like the shivers down your spine. I'm like, oh, perfect. Look at you contained then, like doing nothing. Like everything is like above board and totally chaste. And yet it's like, huh.
Yes, agreed. So what would you rate our hero?
I'm going to give Adam, I kind of want to give him like an 8.
Interesting.
Like, I don't really dislike him. And I quite like him, actually. And like, I couldn't rate him higher than that just because I feel like there's not much more depth past like a certain level.
Yep.
So like, because there's just much surface on him, then like 8's where I stay. But like, I really like him, though. I like how he is. I like his attitude, all that. So I'll give him an 8.
I agree. I think for the same reasons, like the same reasons are the reason that I have the number that I have, which is a 7. I think he's a good hero. I think that we're missing a little something from him. I don't know what. I think the depth just isn't there. And I think like he doesn't like stir me as a person quite as much, so that's I think he's good. Like I think 7 is like good, great, and that's where he's at for me.
That's fair. I mean, like I was kind of waffling between 7 and 8. I decided I liked him more than like the other things better. So.
That's totally fair.
But yeah. So, and then Evie.
Yes. So I think Evie is more developed than Adam.
Yes.
And I think she's interesting, like I said, with her reputation is one thing and really she's another. Like her thing with the O'Flahertys is awesome. I think she's very cool. She kind of like, I don't know, I guess she's a product of her past and she's like, I have to think of more than myself. I have to think of my brother and sister, which is why she decides she's going to go do the life with Lord Lisle. It's just like a little bit more self-sacrificing than I like, rather than like fighting for it, but it makes for a fun ending. And so for that reason, I give her a 7.5. I like her a little bit more than Adam, but I don't think she's like in my top heroines for me.
That's fair. I really liked her dynamic. Yeah, for me, I thought the end where she was like, I'll just go to Lord Lisle. That's when I kind of was disliking her. Because I know she makes all the sacrifices because she's looking out for other people. And the thing is, like, everything she's ever done has been so honest. Like, she went and got a job at the theater because that's where she could get it, because someone said she was pretty and that she should be on the stage. So that's what she did because she could get more money that way, and she took her brothers and sisters with her. Like, she made choices based off survival and based off this, but I don't think she was never manipulative about it. Like, I think these things just kind of got thrown her way, so she took advantage of them. And then
I agree.
At the end where like there was a bit of effort that she had to put in, all of a sudden it was like, I'm not going to be at the mercy of a man. Screw all this. Like, I'm just going to go take this one because that's the safer option. And it's like, but, you haven't always made the safest options. Like, I know you've made the best options, but like, really, this is where you want to leave it? You just want to like leave it all behind because, some sort of imagined thing. Like, and I get it was difficult for her and like her to put it together, but that's where I would also say she's a 7.5 for me because I feel like Adam really stepped in and did Adam's thing by bringing her brother and bringing her sister, and he figured out the compromise that could allow them to be together.
Yeah.
And Evie couldn't even like consider the compromise. She just was like, it's not going to go my way. It's not going to be a safe option. So I'm just going to take the safe option and leave, even though this is what I would actually want to do.
Yeah, fair.
And so 7.5.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite quote from this book?
Let me find it. I made 118 highlights in this book.
Did you really? My goodness.
Well, for a second, I think I was the one who was like putting the notes together. So I like started doing a lot of notes. And then when you're like, oh, I have to do the notes for this, I was like, all right, Zoe's doing the notes for this. And I was like, well, I'm just going to continue on this trend.
Fair enough.
So why don't you go first and then I'll find mine.
All right. That sounds good. So mine is from the beginning and it's when we're learning about Adam a little bit. And so it says, quote, he remained, quote, dangerously unmarried, or at least that was how his Aunt Isolde Eversey put it. But then she would, given the nerve taxing his cousins Colin and Ian had given her. Mercifully unmarried was often how Adam viewed it. The dreams of standing naked at the altar had been supplanted by dreams of swimming through the vicarage up to his neck in blackberry preserves, only to find the door neatly embroidered shut by the words, "Bless our home." Which I just loved because, like, I loved the vision of that because he's always getting like these he's getting preserves and these embroidered gifts from everyone, from every sermon that he does, from all the young adoring ladies. And so it's like, his nightmare is his house being embroidered shut with "Bless our home." I just love that.
I know. That was a good visual. Okay. This I just think is a good description. So this is around where Henny is sick and Adam has learned about it and he's at the Pitney's house and then the doctor's away and then Mrs. Pitney like finds a reason to leave the room. So Adam's, stuck at the dinner table with Amy and he knows there's a lot, she's broken it off with Hainsworth, blah, blah, blah. And so they're alone and Adam says, "Miss Pitney, why do you suppose envy is one of the deadly sins?" Her head jerked up again, eyes narrowed. "It's a sin against yourself. It harms you and blinds you to many things, including good intentions. God saw fit to make you perfect the way you are, not more or less perfect than someone else, perfect as you are. You need to believe it for the right person to see it. And the feeling when you are truly seen for who you are, it simply cannot be mistaken." There
were a lot of good lessons in this book. Julianne Long had some real good writing moments, which she always does. So
no, I did. And I really felt that story like with like Miss Pitney and like her realizing that like Evie had just been trying to help her and actually had good intentions, but she was blinded by it because the good intentions weren't giving like the other person's good intentions were were hindering her own purposes. So she didn't want to believe them. And I was just yeah. But there was a lot of them too. Like,
there's a lot of good
there's
quotes
so
in
many
this
good
book.
ones. That was I just liked the lesson in that. There was another one too that just was very descriptive. But anyway.
So then let's talk about our steaminess rating. So, and our encounter counter. We had 2 encounters in this, which happened well after page 200. There's a long, slow burn coming up to it. But I would say,
I was like, I can't remember. I was like thinking in this, I was like, do they do this? Do they do it in this book? I can't remember. Do we get like a hint of it after the wedding? Because every once in a while you read a romance and it's like sometimes fade to black, or like you get the coupling like in the epilogue after they're married.
I know. But no, we got 2. I thought, though, both of those, by the time you get to that, honestly, like we already talked about the kiss on the neck. Like that scene was so steamy. I think this was a hot cup of tea that you had to blow on a little bit before you could take a sip.
For sure. I think I texted you and I was like, woo, we had to wait for them. But when we got them,
yes.
Like they were good. But I mean, like that was the whole part of it, the slow burn and like that one little kiss, like it taught them that they were like, we can't touch each other. Like, there's too much chemistry that like if our like flesh meets, like it's just going to explode. Like we can't even like pretend that we're going to go down that road unless we're ready to. And they did explode.
Yeah. So we have now arrived at our feminist recap. So I think you have some thoughts.
Yes. And so while I think it's good, I think it was feminist in the sense that it was like shining a light on the hypocrisies of like female gender, especially in social norms at that time, and things that we still feel like we're in a trap in today. Like, because we've had the privilege of not had to think about, going into sex work as a profession. Like, we are therefore morally better than someone else, because that person is promiscuous and lives in sin. And like, they're obviously just a terrible person down at the heart of it. But it's like, you don't know, like, this is a perfect example of like, people have different circumstances and different histories we don't know.
Well, and also Evie was like, think about the bread auction, right? Where she's like, we women deserve more. We should support each other. Like that's what she's trying to prove in that moment. And that like women work very hard and that's who she is. And that's what she's always done. And she said like, I know my self-worth and, I make decisions that I can live with. And so like, there's a lot of empowering feminist things about that.
And I love the line that we quoted in it where it's just like, all these husbands should treat their wives like queens. Yes. And anything less than that is unacceptable. And I was like, yes, girl.
For sure. But I agree. Like there was something about the bullying and the shunning and all of that I didn't enjoy. And I don't think that
waiting for someone to make a misstep, like waiting for her to do something. Like, it's just like, oh, give it up.
I don't think it's unfeminist because I think like the moral of the story was, that to see past the facade and to see past the rumors and to become better people, which the ladies did at the end. But I didn't enjoy reading it.
Herself either.
No, she didn't. She stayed true to who she was. She believed in herself. Like it was all good. But I was bullied a lot. I was shunned. I had the silent treatment to me in middle school and in high school and again in college. And, for whatever reason that was that I had such a difficult time making friends when I was young, like it just is like not my favorite trope to read. So I think that definitely like curtailed my enjoyment of the book.
Yes.
I don't enjoy reading those characters and I don't enjoy seeing people being hurt that way. It didn't like, turn it into a 0 for me or something, but it definitely just kind of like, it's just not my thing.
Yeah, and I would agree. I don't think it's my thing either because I get so frustrated because I'm just like, get your head out of your fucking ass, you moralizing piece of shit. Like,
yeah. The holier than thou attitude, you know, or just like, you know, people who don't understand other people where like, I remember, you know, I rode horses in high school, surprise, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember like all of my friends would always want to talk to me about boys and I would listen for hours. And then like, I would want to talk about horses for 5 minutes and they'd be like, Zoe, we don't care about horses. And I would just be like, I don't care about boys right now, but like I listen to you because it's important to you. Yeah. Obviously, these were not good friends, but that's kind of how I feel like some of these ladies are, right? Where they're just like, we don't give a shit about anything that you care about. Like, yeah, you know,
well, and also the whole like, and I get that where she's like, I just want to have friends. Cause like I've always felt that, you know, like I've gone through phases in my life where I feel like I had pretend friends. Like, we hung out and we did things and I thought we were friends. But then at the end of the day, like I wasn't not invited friends to all the things. Like I was kind of like, I wasn't the one that was on the group phone calls, you know? And then after moving on from high school, like I had one group, like I had one good friend, like, you know, I wasn't great friends with everyone. And then I had another one good friend literally just like stopped talking to me one day. Ugh. And I was like, I thought we were friends. We've been best, like I've considered you one of my best friends for 4 years. And now not even a year of separation. And suddenly I'm not your friend. Like you literally won't speak to me. Yeah. And like, yet you're still like best, like girls weekend. We've been apart for so long. And I'm just like, why? No. I don't get it. Like, yeah. If you don't want to be my friend, don't be my friend, but don't just like pretend you're my friend for that long. Like, did I offend you? I don't understand.
Yeah. So I think many of us can relate to the feeling of being shunned for kind of maybe for a reason, but also maybe for terrible reasons or maybe for no reason. And still that feeling of being shunned or the silent treatment or just like people looking down on you, it's a terrible feeling. And I think it's good to write about it. It's just kind of, if it's happened to you, it's kind of hard to read about it.
Yeah, it's hard to read and it's frustrating. But yeah, so that's where we are with this book.
I know, but still I think this book is a supporter for sure.
I agree with that. And I agree overall, like I did enjoy reading the book. Like it was quick, it was fun. I enjoyed the chemistry. I enjoyed the characters and even the side characters. Like, I mean, I didn't like the moralizing, but Lady Fenimore was awesome.
Oh, she's great.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. So that's a perfect lead-in. What would be your final book rating for this book?
My final book rating would be like a 7. Yeah.
I agree. I liked this book. I thought this was a perfectly good book, but it's just not one of my favorites. It's still a well-done book, and I think it deserves a 7.
Absolutely. And it's still a book like I really thoroughly enjoyed, and I enjoyed it more having had like been rereading the series more recently and getting all that back together. So it's fun to revisit these stories and these characters and, you know, getting through again. So
I agree. So speaking of rereading Pennyroyal Green, Kelsey, what are we reading next time? Are we staying in Pennyroyal?
No, unfortunately, we're not. We still have such a long way to go, guys.
So many more.
But there's also just so many books to read and so little time. So we will come back. Don't you worry. We are on this mission together, guys. We will read all of them.
We will.
However, next time we will be reading 9 Rules to Break While Romancing a Rake by Sarah McLean.
Woo! Our first Sarah McLean on the podcast.
Yeah. And this is her first adult romance novel. So it'll be fun to read this one since at least I know I have because I've read her most recent book. Zoe.
I still haven't. I'll get to it. I will.
And she's quite a favorite, but it's nice to revisit this first book of hers. And hopefully you guys will love it as well. I mean, I remember loving it. I remember loving all Sarah McLean, but we'll find out now that I've read later works versus earlier works, later works. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Yeah, I'm excited, guys.
I'm excited too. This was actually written 10 years ago, which seems like, I mean, it's literally a decade ago, but it seems like forever ago. I've been in the house for a month, so like Wednesday seems forever ago.
That's true. Wow. To think this book came out when I'd already started reading romance novels.
Wow.
Like a lot of these series or books start like, you know, they're 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but it's like before I started reading romance novels. But like 2010, like I'd already been reading them. Like I was in the midst of it.
So cool. Well, I'm really excited to read this one and to discuss it. So thank you all for listening, and join us next week as we read 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake by Sarah McLean.
And may all your ever afters end happily.
Tea and Strumpets is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.